Hey guys, welcome back to another video, and today I'm going to rank all of the X-Men movies except for New Mutants, but I am going to include Deadpool and Wolverine because I think it will be really fun to rank all the X-Men movies since I've never done it before, and this is going to be the first one with the MCU, and so I'm excited for this. So let's get into it. So if you guys have seen my previous rankings, obviously X-Men Origins Wolverine is going to be dead last. This film, it's trying to do too much. It's not only trying to do too much, but it's also boring. Like, they don't make it interesting. There are some cool scenes and interesting things with some fights and some of the certain bits of characters that I really like, and some scenes that I really like the opening scene of Wolverine and Sabretooth going through the various wars during the opening credits is one of the best scenes in that movie. And to me, the same thing with the Deadpool scene, not actual Deadpool, but the Wade Wilson scene of him coming out of the elevator and using all the, doing this thing with the swords and blocking and slicing up bullets and killing off the soldiers is to me, one of the best Deadpool scenes. And I really like the way how they use that, right? But I also think that X-Men Origins is one of those movies that, like, there are fun scenes in it. There's some cool, interesting things. There's some really good acting with Hugh Jackman. Really good acting from Ryan Reynolds as Wade. Lee Schreiber as Sabretooth does a fantastic job as Sabretooth. And it does retcon the first X-Men movie, which I really, really love. It's one of my favorite X-Men movies. But it's one of those things, too, where you're just like, why did you have to retcon this? It's like Transformers The Last Night. You're just like, why did you retcon that? But, yeah, it's just kind of odd to me. So, that is obviously dead last for me. Number 12 is obviously X-Men Apocalypse. I like, much like X-Men Origins, I really like scenes in this movie where it's like you have the whole, psychological battles that Professor X is having with Apocalypse. You have the awesome Quicksilver scene where it's the explosion and all that. But much like X-Men Origins, this is the movie that Bryson did after X-Men Days of Future Past. And the thing is too, is that he was on a hot streak with the X-Men movies. He did a fantastic job with X1, X2, incredible. He didn't do X-Men 3 because he went to do Superman Returns. He didn't do First Class, but then they brought him back for Days of Future Past, and then X-Men Apocalypse right after that. So I was very excited to watch Apocalypse, because I was like, you got Bryan Singer. He's done 3 banger X-Men movies. That, if I'm not including standalone movies, 3 banger X-Men movies. So I was like, okay, what am I expecting with this film? And so there are some really cool things in it, but there aren't a lot of great bits in it. Like the what do you call it? The Storm storyline didn't really seem like a Storm storyline to me. And again, this is coming from a guy, I will admit, this is coming from a guy that did not read the comics. He only has seen the films and bits and pieces of the cartoons. So I don't really know what the Storm is like. I have heard that she was a crook at first, but then kind of became a superhero after that. But the way that they portrayed it in this movie didn't feel like a Storm thing to me. And all the X-Men characters in this movie were villains. Storm, Cyclone, which would have been really cool to see Cyclone in Dark Phoenix for like actually working with the team and all that, but they got rid of it. Magneto, got rid of him. There was some, Oscar Isaac did the best as he could as Apocalypse, but at the end of the day, it just kind of fell flat. I think that James McAvoy does a very good job as Professor X in this. I think that Ty Sheridan does a really good young Cyclops. And I think it's one of those things where it's like you really get the struggle of that, right? And I think that that's one of those films that like you watch it and you're kind of like, oh, that's actually very interesting that that you've done that. But it just doesn't really work fully. You know what I mean? Because that leads into my number 11. My number 11 is X-Men Dark Phoenix. I think that Dark Phoenix works because you're invested in these characters. For the most part. We'll get to this in a little bit, but obviously I have Last Stand a little higher. But I do like Dark Phoenix. I think that it's a step above Apocalypse. But it's a step below, way much of a step below of Days of Future Past and First Class. I think that there was such cool things explored in here. I think that the fight scenes were really, really good, and you really feel the Jean and Scott dynamic in this. And as much as I like Last Stand, and I'll talk about this one more when I get to the Last Stand, but Dark Phoenix, you have the core of the Scott and Jean relationship, unlike X-Men Last Stand. But I think that this one has more of the comic book origin story as opposed to the like the film behind the scenes drama and issue, you know what I mean? So I think that there's a lot of things in this movie that works, but there are bits that don't work. Much like my number 10. So breaking my top 10, we have The Wolverine. I like The Wolverine. I do not think it's some groundbreaking movie. I honestly think that The Wolverine is one of those movies that it's really good. The fight scenes are very, very good. But watching films nowadays, like especially like when I'm watching them by myself, I have this weird feeling that like these movies are way too long. And it's not a good feeling. I just like, I look at it and I'm like, ugh, that's a bit, what's going on there? What's this? It's just one of those things where I'm just like, huh? Like, why is this girl pulling off her face? And like, also I had questions of why is Famke Janssen playing Jean in flashbacks here when clearly X-Men Last Stand is a thing, but then after that, especially the mid-credit scene, you have the whole Days of Future Past setup of Professor X and Magneto recruiting Wolverine at the airport to set up Days of Future Past. It's just really bizarre to me. Because then you get the whole thing of like they still show scenes in Days of Future Past, and I'll talk about this later when I get to Days of Future Past, but it's like they show scenes from X-Men The Last Stand in Days of Future Past, even though that by the end of that film they're ignoring that. It's just kind of like, eh? What? What's going on? I don't get it. But no, so it's just one of those things where I just look at it and I'm like, huh, weird. Why is it doing that? But no, I think that there's some really good things, really good fights in the Wolverine, some really cool dynamics. But I do think that the robot samurai thing is just like, oh my god. It's fine when they do it in Turtles. Because Turtles is a stupid thing anyway. You could argue with Wolverine that it is stupid, but they turn out to be real cool ideas. But one is awesome and stupid, Turtles, which I love the Ninja Turtles. It's one of my favorite franchises, but you have like awesome and stupid, and then you have awesome and cool, right? So X-Men is meant to be awesome and cool, not like Ninja Turtles where it's awesome and stupid. So, the samurai mech thing, I was just like, oh my god. It's time to turn to Transformers. Or Michael Bay's Turtles. It's ridiculous. So, yeah, I think that there's some real good things in the Wolverine, but it doesn't work as... But I think that it works as a whole, but I think that the ending, especially the mech element, falls off a cliff for me. Now, number 9 is where I have X-Men The Last Stand. I do not think that this is a terrible movie. I think that this is a good movie, but I do think it's the weakest out of the original trilogy, if you know what I mean. Like, I love this movie. I think that it's a very underrated movie. I think that, the love triangle thing is there, set up from the previous 2 movies with, Jean, Scott, and Wolverine. But, unfortunately, they did have to kill, James Marsden Cyclops off because of, James Marsden going off and making Superman Returns. With Bryan Singer, actually. So, there's some stuff in there that works. I think that the fight scenes are some of the best fights that we've ever got in an X-Men movie. Whether if it's the final battle or, like, the thing that I love about The Last Stand one, and I'll go into this more when I do my ranking of the X-Men final battles, is that you have the X-Men actually being a team, as opposed to, like, we're going to have Jean Scott over here, we're going to have Wolverine over here doing a separate thing, then we're going to have Nightcrawler and Storm here. Which I love X2, but unfortunately it doesn't really do a lot of that, like, dynamic stuff, right? Like that team aesthetic. X1 does, but unfortunately when you look at the team dynamic as a whole, I mean not the team dynamic, but the final battle as a whole, it's kind of dated now. Because they've made Storm, Jean, and Cyclops in the head, but then Wolverine is you'll focus on Wolverine for the battle until they're trying to save Rogue. But even then, that's the only really team bit you get, and that's not really much of an action thing. That's just a plan for them to get Wolverine up there. So I love how this movie is like, you see like the whole like Kid Pride run through walls. You get to see Storm. You get to see Wolverine and Colossus doing a fastball special where Colossus grabs Wolverine, like he turns in the middle, grabs Wolverine, throws him. So like, there's so many cool things in The Last Stand that really works. Like, I think that the scene where Jean kills Professor X, that is bonkers of a scene, and that is a scene that, like, I do get people's complaint with the score because it is very generic superhero score as opposed to like an emotional score, but I do kind of understand why people do not like the score. So like, because all the actors do a great job, the action's great, there are some really good lines, like the whole bit of Wolverine walking in, seeing Beast for the first time. I was like, who's the furball? And then Professor X is like, Logan, meet Beast, Dr. Hank McCoy. And he's like, the Wolverine. I hear that you're quite an animal. And he's like, look who's talking. I think that is such a great bit that kind of comes back to the first one, where like, it's a nice on the level joke of what was it, the whole like bit where Wolverine walks in the first one, he's like, Cyclops, Storm, Sabretooth, I mean Magneto, what do they call you, Wheels? So like, I think that there's some real good humour that is like humour that you would see the MCU do now, like the whole bit of Tony Stark and England going like, oh sorry, until right this second I thought you were Build-A-Bear. So I thought that was very cool to see, and I love X-Men The Last Stand. I do not think it's a fantastic movie, but I do think it's better than people give it credit for. Now number 8 for me, stepping up a bit, is X-Men First Class. I really love X-Men First Class. I still think it's too long. in the way that... Here's the thing. At first, I watched it and I was like, this is good, but this is not, like, fantastic. But then it ended up being the second worst, I think, X-Men movie to me, because everyone were like, oh my god, X-Men First Class is amazing. And I'm like, is it? I think it's just a bit overrated. So, but then watching it again, I was like, no, this actually really works. But the only reason why it's this low is because that it would have been more high if it was not as long as it is. Because something about this movie is that it feels lengthy. It feels like that, like, not necessarily you're putting in scenes just to waste time, but you could probably trim some bits, going like, okay, let's trim some of this, trim some of this, trim some of this, and have more of a contained bit that I'm just like, but I'm like, yeah, I like this. I think that this works. I think that X-Men First Class is a really good X-Men movie, but not one that I hold on the pedestal of greatest comic book movies of all time, which, like, the greatest comic book movies of all time to me are ones I give either a 10 out of 10 or a 9 out of 10 to. The 8 out of 10s are more like, they're great movies, but it's one of those things where it's like, I can't give them more 10 out of 10, and I prefer others to these, if you know what I mean. So that's why it kind of falls down number 8 for me. But number 7 is Deadpool 2. I love Deadpool 2. Watching the Deadpool trilogy before Deadpool and Wolverine made me realize that I think that this is the weakest out of the trilogy. But I do love it, though. I do love it. I think that it's one of those movies that it's like, you can see that Ryan Reynolds was doing crazy things with this movie, and like the fact that he was more in control of this movie than he was in the first movie, you can really tell, and you get some really great comedy bits and some great action bits because you have the whole David Leitch direction in this movie, which, like, I love The Fall Guy this year. That was one of my favorite movies this year, and so I love David Leitch, and I think that a lot of the movies that he didn't direct, he did direct some of the action sequences on. So I think he did, like, the recent Michael Bay Turtles, which I love those action scenes. Some of the John Wick stuff. So, like, he's done a lot of stuff that I'm like, good job. But no, so I think that there's a lot of stuff in there that I'm just like, this really works. And I love that, right? I think that that's great. And I think that, like, seeing Zazie Beetz' Domino and Josh Brolin's Cable, you do get very, very cool comic book characters in this movie, and I think that it really works within the story of Deadpool 2. Number 6 for me is Logan. I do love Logan. I think that's great. The reason why I don't hold as much of a high pedestal of a 10 out of 10 or something, and it's more of an 8, which if you go watch my review, I do explain that. But if you go watch my review, I mentioned how, like, I wouldn't watch this movie constantly, because I won't watch this movie constantly. Like, this won't be one of my rotation comic book movies. Unlike stuff like No Way Home, Endgame, The Bay Turtles, like Deadpool and Wolverine that we're about to get to, right? And some of those other movies, right? Like the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies, and even some of the TASM movies, right? So, like, even those movies I would hold into more of a high regard than, I'll rewatch them more than Logan, because Logan is a sad movie, and it also makes you go, like, because it's very long, and also it's sad, it makes me more of a thing of, like, oh, I don't want to watch the rest of this. Like, it kind of just... But because Dad wanted to watch Logan before Deadpool and Wolverine, we watched it the first night, got halfway through it, and I was like, can we stop? Because this movie's a lot. So we stopped it, and then we came back the next night before we saw Deadpool and Wolverine, and we watched it, the rest of it. And I was like, thank goodness we did not do all that in one hit, because that is just crazy. But no, I love Logan. I think it's so good. And I think that this is where you get, like, true Wolverine. Like, the whole thing of him using the claws and going berserker rage. You do get berserker rages in the other X-Men movies, but not as much as this one, and I do love that for that. And I do love the emotion of this movie, and how much this movie really is based on Old Man Logan, which I love that, right? And I think it's so good. Number 5, we have Deadpool 1. I love Deadpool 1. I think it's so good. I think that they used the R rating well in this movie, and I love that for that. And I think that they did a great job with the action in this movie, and the fact that they leaked the test footage. I just want to say now, thank goodness they did, because otherwise we wouldn't have had this movie at all. But I do love this movie, and I think that this movie is so good. I love it. I think that this is one of those movies that I watch it and I'm like, how are you a thing? How are you a thing? I don't get it. But I love that, right? And I think that that makes this movie so great, because we did not expect this movie at all. This is a movie that we kind of knew that we wanted, but we didn't know that we were actually going to get. So it's one of those things where you're just like, oh man, I want to see that. I want to see that, man. And we finally saw it, and it's awesome. I like how Deadpool 1 laid the groundwork of radar comic book movies with this and Logan. They are so good, and I love that for that. Number 4 for me is X-Men Days of Future Past. This is one hell of a crossover if I've ever seen one. You have the original X-Men cast with like Hugh Jackman, Patrick Stewart, Ian McKellen, Halle Berry, Anna Paquin, depending if you watch the road cut or not. You have Anna Paquin in the road cut. You also have, oh my god, I forgot the actor who plays Iceman. But you do have Iceman, you have Kitty Pryde, you have Colossus. All actors and characters from the original trilogy, with the first class characters. So, like Nicholas Holt's Beast, you have James McAvoy's Professor X, you have oh my god, Michael Fassbender's Magneto, you have Jennifer Lawrence's Mystique, right? So you have like prequel movies that fit, but also they don't fit, because they don't mention anything about Mystique and Professor X having been good friends together in the original trilogy. They just are just public enemies to each other, which doesn't really work. But it's also one of the things where you just go like, well, what else are you gonna do? So it is one of those things, but I do love that, right? And I think it's one of those things where it's like, it's so cool. And the fact that this is the crossover event that we've been waiting for is bonkers. I love that for that. Number 3 is X-Men 1. Yes, I love X-Men 1. I think it's so good. Getting introduced to this world, and the fact that it builds out the world in a way that a general audience can understand. It works so perfectly, and I love it. Love that for that. And I think it really, really works, and I love that. I think that this movie does a really good job at going like, okay, we are mutants. It's the key to human evolution. Here's why that is. And they explain that throughout the movie. And I love that. I think it's so good. And I love Hugh Jackman as Wolverine. I love Halle Berry as Storm. I love James Marsden's Cyclops. I love Famke Janssen's Jean. I love Anne Paquin's Rogue. I love all the castings in this movie. It's so good, and I love that. I think that this movie made the thing that we didn't expect. And if it wasn't for this, if it wasn't for Blade, X-Men, and Spider-Man, we wouldn't have got the MCU at all. And I love that. I love how we got this true respect to the X-Men. Right, so, and number 2 for me is, of course, Deadpool and Wolverine. I love this movie. It's my favorite movie of the year so far. And I love how this movie is a gigantic thanks, respect, tribute to everything that came before, from the jokes, like, and again, spoiler, but from the joke that Ryan Reynolds pulls down the microphone and goes like, suck it, Fox, I'm going to Disneyland, and then bumps us down the camera and breaks the camera and goes like, get fucked. And then you also have like the whole joke of Chris Evans being Johnny Storm, and Deadpool just going like, yes, he's gonna say it. And Hugh Jackman's like, so what? He's like, Avengers! And then Chris Evans is like, flame on! And he's like, sorry, what now? And then, I love that. It was so cool. And seeing Blade, Elektra, X-23, and our first real movie with Channing Tatum as Gambit, I think it was so cool. And I love how this movie was such a respect to all of the Fox movies, with both the cameos, the jokes, and this one hell of a tribute with clips from all the X-Men movies, Daredevil, Elektra, the Fantastic Four movies, not necessarily the Blade movies because that's a New Line thing, but I love how it was one hell of a tribute to pre-MCU Marvel, and I love that. I think it was so good, and I love how that movie also gave us it. Like, that movie also feels like a comic book. You're watching the cameos pop up. You're watching the storyline. You're watching the fight scenes, especially, like, whether you're watching the bye or you're watching the scene where Deadpool, Wolverine, Elektra, X-23, Gambit, and Blade are going into Cassandra Nova's base, or you're watching the final battle where it's done in an incredible one-shot. Whether you're watching any of those scenes, you go like, this feels like a Marvel comic, like I'm reading a Marvel comic on the page. And I think that Deadpool and Wolverine, that movie, does it exceptionally well in a way that that works very, very well for that. But of course, number one for me is X2 X-Men United. I love this movie. I think that it's one of my favorite movies of all time. It's one of my favorite comic book movies. It's my favorite X-Men movie. I love it. I think that we get to see Wolverine the way that we wanted Wolverine, but in a PG-13 way, where it's not necessarily showing any blood, but showing the Berserker Rage. I think that we also have some really great stuff with Nightcrawler. I love the opening White House scene with Nightcrawler. I love the Jean and Storm stuff in this movie. Of course I love Rogue and Bobby. I think that they're so good. I think that everyone does a really, really good job in this movie. I think that this movie is one of those things where it's like, you watch it and you're like, this is a movie that makes me question what the MCU X-Men is going to be like, because I don't know how they can top this. Because you watch this movie and you're like, how in the world can they top this? I don't even know if you can, because this movie makes it so special that it's like, how can you top it? But we know that it is probably going to top it because we're going to get classic X-Men suits. So it makes me excited, you know. So I'm excited for that. So, guys, that is all 13 X-Men movies ranked not with New Mutants. Because I haven't seen New Mutants. I will review New Mutants, and then I'll probably do another ranking. But I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care. Bye.
Hey there. Subscribe to my channel. And also press this bell icon.